The latest season of The Boys has added 2 new characters to the series, and it seems they've not even been taken from the comic books. The show's writers have always made it clear to reference the present world based on various pop culture events. Fans might have noticed the random mentions of celebrities in the series, and how much it might be feasible. These references make the show a lot more exciting as we connect with the series and the relevance of the protagonists' plans. With a massive influence from the world, it appears that many of the characters in The Boys are inspired by various places. Let's take a look at some of these references and real-world inspirations of these characters. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Homelander, evil Superman. Homelander is the face of the Seven, and he has some of the most common powers amongst the Supes and the Boys in peak form. But if you look closely, you might notice some interesting elements of his powers and personalities that might match another superhero in his worst form. Sometimes we can almost say, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's the man who crashed a plane. Homelander is indeed the worst rendition of Superman gone wrong. However, the fact that Homelander doesn't have to adhere to the Superman aspect makes him much more brutal than we imagine. We can see that in the 2019 film, Brightburn tried to work out the idea of Superman origins gone wrong, but that they had to make it a horror limited the character development to very few aspects. Even DCEU tried to bring this concept to life, but it failed to be implemented after the plans for a darker Superman were shut down. Meanwhile, Homelander is given a personal trauma, something that we've seen in the latest episodes of Season 4, and this trauma makes him the brutal hero that we see.
Tell me, Doctor. What's your radar telling you?
Billy Butcher, Punisher. Butcher is an anti-hero. When things started, he sounded like the hero in a world filled with a nasty bunch of superheroes. In comes Butcher, with a personal vendetta against Homelander, and forms the team that shuts down and kills the Supes. But then slowly, we got to witness how nasty and brutal he could get, and it just didn't stop. Surprisingly, the TV series had to tone down the ruthless persona of Butcher to keep him an anti-hero, and not make a villain out of him entirely. And it's an exciting aspect of the character, because anti-heroes make for some interesting people. Deadpool and Wolverine are pretty popular anti-heroes amongst our favorite Marvel characters, but then there's one who, you might agree, is the perfect match for Butcher. Garth Ennis created Butcher as a parody of Punisher, yet there are times when one might think that Punisher wishes he was like Butcher, while Butcher wishes he was more like the Punisher. Butcher manages to strike fear into every Supe in town when he makes his group, the Boys, and kills them individually. There are even times that Butcher is seen being furious when any of his teammates take sides with the Supes, and he'll do anything to kill them off because of his strife with them. This storyline is very similar to Frank Castle's, often getting into severe fights with most of the superheroes in his universe, and the reason behind most of these fights is his brutal methods. It's almost as if you would want to see what happens between these two people one-on-one. Huey, Simon Pegg. In a nasty world of superheroes being villains and people getting killed hither and thither, Huey was a saving grace. However, remaining calm and composed in a world filled with all that is not easy. So we see Huey lose someone very close to him in an accident caused during a battle involving A-Train, whose character is based on a DC hero, but we'll discuss that later. Now, Huey does want to take revenge for the death of his girlfriend, and that's when Butcher makes him join the Boys. Throughout the story, Huey is the most innocent and human among all these colorful characters, affecting his fate. I mean, the dude was a fan of superheroes, and one of the main things that came in handy during his time with the Boys was the nerdy aspect of him. Now, if you've heard or seen anything by Edgar Wright, or been watching the recent Mission Impossible films, you might be able to identify the person on whom Huey's character is based. He appears in the Amazon series as Huey's father, a character whose fate will probably change significantly in the upcoming episodes. Simon Pegg was the inspiration for the character of Huey, particularly his character Tim Bisley from the British show Spaced. Now, the actor seems to be okay with his depiction in the series, as it references his time as a part of various projects that have become relevant to pop culture.
It's your favorite deplorable, Firecracker, with a special edition of my
Firecracker, Marjorie Taylor Greene. In the latest season of The Boys, she introduces 2 new Supes who have become part of the Seven. While Sister Sage uses her brains to make things work, choosing Firecracker as a member of the Seven was a significant surprise to the viewers. But then we witnessed how messed up Firecracker is, as she turns out to be a literal firecracker of controversies and conspiracies. The character hardly has any power, but she can turn people against someone politically just by using the right words and stories. When asked what she can can give to the people by Sister Sage, she clarifies that she can gather people and give them a purpose. She proves it in the 4th episode, when the boys decide to release some things from her past, but she makes people forgive her and instead turns them against Starlight. Georgia representative and controversial political figure Marjorie Taylor Greene inspired Firecracker's character. Greene is known for making some of the craziest conspiracies involving some of the most critical US events, and it works. There was a time when she also stated that 9/11 was a hoax, and believe me, there are people who say that's true as much as there are people who think that the lizard people rule the world. It isn't shocking to see how the show manages to parody actual events. Who can forget that iconic opening when the Supes and other celebrities singing John Lennon's Imagine as a joke on the poorly executed celebrity version that came out during COVID? Lennon himself might have enjoyed that one.
Welcome to New York. I'm Ashley Barrett, Director of Talent Relations.
Starlight, Mary Marvel design, Dazzler parody. Our next character has quite a history with the previous one, which might be an essential aspect of what gives her some depth we mightn't have expected. Starlight is probably the only Supe who has supported the boys in a way, considering others came around during particular situations. The fact that she has human values leads to the click between her and Huey, and ensures that she will be an essential weapon against the Supes. She even tried her hand in politics by campaigning against Vought, but that seems to have been wholly destroyed now that Sister Sage pitted Firecracker against her. Even though she's been put in a difficult spot, we can be sure she'll figure it out, considering she has the boys with her. We haven't witnessed the full potential of Starlight's powers, even though it's clear that she can absorb energy around her and use it against her enemy. These powers and her costume make her very similar to Mary Marvel, the DC character and member of the Shazam family. Fans might have noticed that this similarity was much more evident in Mary Marvel's depiction of the Shazam films. But while the costume might have this inspiration, her powers are something that we have seen amongst a variety of superhero characters. The list of heroes includes Starfire, Dazzler, and so on. At the same time, we can't say if they inspire her, but she might be a parody of such characters from the fictional world.
Was that an almond joy? He has a tree nut allergy. Come with me.
Queen Maeve, Wonder Woman. Queen Maeve was number 2 on the 7, and her fans loved her for her superhero abilities and beauty. While most of the other Supes were involved in acts that would make them the enemies of the world, Maeve almost became like a bystander. She saw these things happen and knew she couldn't do anything, so she ended up being part of the problem herself. It was interesting to see her show her humanity, or whatever tidbit was left around when Homelander made some of the most brutal moves. By the end of the previous season, fans were glad to see that she got the end she deserved, even though we do expect her to make a comeback whenever possible. The boys would need her help in solving the case of Homelander. There's no question that Wonder Woman inspired Queen Maeve. Based on almost every aspect of her character, you don't have to think twice about that. Even the fake origin story Vought gave her sounds like Wonder Woman, an empress of the other world. Wonder Woman was the princess of Themyscira, a warrior who was born to defeat Ares to save the world. Apart from a few things like mortality, power of flight, and age, it would be difficult not to think that Queen Maeve is a Wonder Woman knockoff. We're just glad that Wonder Woman had a better fate and finally came to her senses when it was about the Supes. A-Train, Flash. A superhero world doesn't work without speedsters. And even though most have only one, the best is what counts. A-Train is not the best, but the speedster is a member of the 7, automatically making him the best. The character was the very first of the Supes we got to witness in the series when Huey's girlfriend was killed by him accidentally. Yeah, they could have left the speedster alone from being a complete villain because the speedsters are the favorites. But no, A-Train is someone who has witnessed things go wrong and has been involved in them. Over the years, we've had the chance to witness some change in him, but we can only hope that it isn't something temporary and that he becomes a real good guy. The Justice League inspires the characters of the 7 group, and thus we can see how each member is a parody of the heroes from DC. A-Train is the perfect version of Flash gone wrong, and he's pretty fast even though we don't see his powers in their full potential. The only thing that we wished was that A-Train had, just like the Flash, apart from his conscience, is the ability to phase through matter without affecting either himself or the matter. That would have prevented what happened to Huey's girlfriend, even though A-Train was high when he killed her accidentally. While the Flash film might have been an absolute failure, we can depend on A-Train's intriguing storyline to help us fill in the blanks in our hearts for speedsters. Fans of Marvel might consider that A-Train's costume is similar to Quicksilver, but still, A-Train is the Flash of this Justice League gone wrong group of heroes. The Deep, Aquaman. If we had to list the most messed up characters who have done the most crazy things in the show, the Deep would be on the top. We haven't seen him do crazy things that much, but he has done some wild stuff while being one of the worst in the 7. He sexually assaulted Starlight and blackmailed her so she would be removed from the 7. But it is interesting to see how much he's also made to suffer in the series when he's kicked off the 7 and tries hard to get his place back over the years. Later, he again proves to be Homelander's mindless follower when he almost ends up giving A-Train a blowjob under his orders. Like it or hate it, the Deep is inspired inspired by Aquaman, and the series didn't hold back on making every Aquaman joke possible. Fans of Aquaman might be wondering how he's similar to Jason Momoa's cool-looking Aquaman. However, the character design of the Deep is very much inspired by the original Aquaman appearances in the comic books, including the tendency to ride on fish. If only we could send Jason Momoa's Aquaman to knock Deep back to his senses and make him useful. Chase Crawford pulls off the idea of a character who, going against his name, hardly has any depth.
Soldier Boy. Fab Five Freddy told me everybody's fly. DJ's spinning, I said my, Flash is fast.
Soldier Boy, Captain America. Soldier Boy was the highlight of the series, and proved to be one of the best additions when there was no end to how much he was an ideal candidate for the cancel culture. Played by Jensen Ackles, the character was brought in to kill Homelander, but instead, he turned out to be a lot more deadly and out of control. But don't forget that this proud American hero was someone who had played a significant role in defeating the opponents during World War II. Being frozen after the war and brought back to life after about 3 decades proves how different things were back then. But we owe Soldier Boy for that moment when he managed to bring Homelander and Butcher together against him, which is almost impossible to imagine. Remember all those jokes about Captain America when he returned to life after that long period? Soldier Boy depicts the reality of that situation and ends up executing everything these jokes mentioned. Both these characters are very much alike and even carry a shield around, even though they have different powers. Now, that's not the only thing in common between them. At the same time, Soldier Boy's love for America might make him similar to the Peacemaker. Captain America is also proud of his country and works towards saving it. The depiction of Soldier Boy is major evidence of how simple factors like morality can change an entire character. Stormfront. Storm or Thor without Mjolnir. Ooh, Vought's biggest mistake was bringing back from their history one of the series' most controversial characters, Stormfront. Stormfront arrived and almost proved to be someone who can be at par with Homelander, and we nearly got to see them go against each other when it felt like she was going to pull all the strings. But then the two fell for each other. Stormfront was the older member of the Seven, and she had a history associated with the person who created Compound V, as she was Frederick Vought's wife. Not only that, Frederick Vought was a member of the Third Reich, and that proved that Stormfront was a Nazi superhero. We hated her from the moment she entered the room, and wanted to see her stopped. But if it weren't for her, we wouldn't have had the moment when Starlight, Kimiko, and Queen Maeve attacked her together. An all-female team-up like this is something even the Marvel Cinematic Universe hasn't been able to achieve. Now, Stormfront did have a unique set of powers, and the only character from the superhero world that can be considered similar to her is Thor, the God of Thunder. While Thor carries Mjolnir around with him, Stormfront doesn't require any weapon to cause thunder and lightning. Apart from that, Stormfront has super strength similar to Thor, and while we haven't seen Thor fly properly without using Mjolnir, Stormfront can fly very clearly and kill her enemies ruthlessly. Of all the people, we wish it wasn't Thor, but then he is the only one anywhere near Stormfront. Black Noir, Batman. Black Noir is an absolute mystery, and he's been a part of Vought's creations for a very long time, because he was a member of Payback, along with the present group, the Seven. We don't see much in terms of him, except 1 or 2 times he goes on a mission and manages to permanently secure a win, apart from sometimes when he had to go against Kimiko and she survived. 2 factors add to this mysterious character's intrigue: his sneaky moves and mysterious silence. We occasionally see the man underneath the mask, making us wonder what happened to him. Homelander killed him in the first season, and he was replaced by some theater actor wearing a costume. Based on his skill sets and the silence, one can't help but compare him with Batman because the team is a version of Justice League. But we've seen Batman gone wrong in the various alternate timelines and parallel universe storylines from DC, and Noir just doesn't fit right to these renditions. You might have observed that he obeys Homelander's orders without thought. The same is true for Batman, who becomes Superman's follower every time the Justice League goes bad in the comic books. To be honest, there was a lot of expectation from Black Noir when he appeared because of his Batman vibes, but then he never really developed much, and as a hilarious move, he was replaced by a stage actor in the costume after his death. Ezekiel, Plastic Man and Elongated Man. Ezekiel is a preacher whose very introduction to the series is evident of the crazy and mad elements of the Supes in the series. This preacher was the very first time we saw Huey manage to go against someone all by himself. He successfully blackmailed this Supe into getting information regarding Compound V. It's pretty hilarious to imagine that with his sexual abuse and preacher persona, he managed to be able to be someone who can guide a bunch of people according to his will. That happens in the real world, but Ezekiel continues to do that until his last breath, which might be one of the craziest deaths we've seen in the series. series. He was simply torn apart when he was choking Butcher, which might prove that Butcher did it in his subconscious, through whatever powers were left inside of him. There are a lot of religious preachers and controversial figures that can be referenced when we talk about Ezekiel, but then we'll focus on that power aspect and limit it to that. Ezekiel's elongation powers make him someone like Plastic Man, or the Elongated Man. Plastic Man has a history of crime, but he reformed later, something that can never be expected from the Supes and the boys. Marvel fans might link him with Richard Reed's, but Ezekiel doesn't possess any of the variety of skills that Reed has except for the superpowers. Kimiko, Wolverine without the claws. Kimiko became a fan favorite character right from the first time she encountered the boys in one of their missions. She's the only Supe to be a part of the boys, and the original intention for which she was created was to be made into a supervillain that the Seven could defeat and work on their image. Sadly for the Supes, Kimiko is one of the best superheroes to have appeared in the series, and is amongst the best in the boys too. Her character is given a lot of depth from the very beginning, after she lost her brother to Stormfront, and later when she came across someone from her past who faced misery because of Kimiko's actions. When she and Frenchie seem to be in a relationship, we can clearly understand that it's much more complicated. As one of the most remarkable characters in the series, it's no surprise that Kimiko is like Wolverine without the claws. She has the fighting skills and the healing factor, and that has allowed her to recover from some of the worst violent attacks on her. Apart from these details, she shares historical information, such as that both were created as weapons for particular purposes. Just like Wolverine, Kimiko also managed to run away from the people who intended to control her, and the trauma had a profound impact on her. Let's not get into Wolverine's relationship history and anger Cyclops now. Tech Knight, Iron Man, or Batman. Tech Knight was not introduced to the series, even though the fans wanted to see him based on his notorious arc in the comic books, but we finally got to see a version of him in Gen V, when he was one of the antagonists. Now, Tech Knight doesn't have any powers in the comic books. This character just has a suit of armor that he puts on to fight his opponents, and a sidekick named Ladio. The one thing he's known for the most is his crazy addiction to sex. We witness some of this in the Gen V series, where he gets distracted by a hole in a tree and pleasures himself with it. The references for this character are embedded in the Marvel and the DC universe, considering he's a parody of Batman and Iron Man. Marvel's Iron Man inspires the armor, and some of Tony Stark's persona might be in there too, as part of the spoiled rich person. Now, Batman comes in with the idea that Tech Knight has a sidekick with a hilarious name, Ladio, and a tongue-in-cheek mockery of Robin. Let's hope we'll see more of Tech Knight and even Ladio in the 4th season, since he's set to return following the events of Gen V. The Legend, Stan Lee. The Legend was one of the most fantastic characters who appears almost like a guide to the boys, in the role of an informant. The character also had a history with the Supes because he used to work for Vought International before the actions of Stan Edgar, and Madeline Stillwell kicked him out. However, his level of information makes him a valuable asset to the boys, considering he used to cover up the misdeeds of the Supes. This relationship with the Supes makes him one of the most extraordinary characters, as he's been around for a long time. He's also the one to whom Soldier Boy goes to get Madeline Stillwell's address. Like some of the other good people in the series, the Legend has a hatred for Butcher because of his ways, which comes off quite clearly. This character is based on the comic book character who goes by the name of the Old Legend, and almost has the same arc, but the comic book character was based on our beloved Stan Lee, and the title is associated with the fact that he's an old legend in both the comic book and superhero film industry. It's interesting, considering there are moments in the comic where the reading material is considered valuable. Now, based on the character's appearance in the series, he appears to be similar to the likes of the famous producer and scriptwriter Robert Evans. Translucent, Invisible Woman. The very first Supe victim of the boys is someone who held quite a significant position amongst the 7 members. Now, Translucent's arc is the creepiest in the series, because it seems that he hangs around entirely naked for the sake of being invisible all the time. So whenever he's asked to appear, he appears without a single piece of clothing. It's wild how easily the boys captured Translucent and kept him under their captivity. But far more hilarious and outright wild is how they managed to kill him, even though he had the carbon skin that prevented any attack from the outside. Fans might have noticed that Translucent is the most depraved and horrible version of Invisible Woman from the Fantastic Four, but unlike him, she wears a piece of clothing that allows her to be completely invisible while wearing it. Also, she has a one-up on Translucent because of her force fields, which can prevent almost anything, ensuring nobody gets a chance to even touch her. On the other hand, Translucent suffers because his carbon skin makes it easy for him to get attacked with electricity. Blind Spot, Daredevil or his sidekick. At a time when Vought was figuring out new members of the Seven who might help with the team's popularity amongst people, Blind Spot was one of the major candidates. Blind Spot was a blind superhero who was an expert in handling different weapons and possessed superhuman hearing. Ashley felt that adding him to the team might help with the team's image, but Homelander didn't seem to agree. When he was brought to Homelander, the evil, horrible Superman gave Blind Spot a double ear clap and watched him become deaf. Yes, Blind Spot was converted to a useless superhero with just one move by Homelander. But for this brief moment, all the dots connected. We could see that Blind Spot is inspired by the beloved Marvel character Daredevil. They're both blind and can defeat their enemies with their fighting skills. Even though Blind Spot was just a child and innocent, it's evident that Daredevil wouldn't have chosen to join hands with Homelander without intending to go against him. While we might be comparing Blind Spot to Daredevil, fans of the Marvel comics might have realized by now that he might have been a direct knockoff of Daredevil's assistant, who goes by the name Blind Spot. This Blind Spot is similar to Blind Spot from The Boys, and their costumes are somewhat identical. Eagle the Archer, Green Arrow. Eagle the Archer is among those characters who have had a significant difference in their depiction in the Amazon series and comic book arc. While the comic book character coked up and died, amongst other things, the series version was a good and positive person. This behavior from the character comes as a real surprise when Eagle comes to help the Deep by making him join the Church of the Collective so that he can join the Seven again. Later, the Church would turn against Eagle himself. When he went against the institution, they smeared his name and tried to ruin his reputation. We later find that he had released a rap album, but that wasn't going well as a career choice either. We have quite a collection of bow and arrow bearing characters in the comic books, yet Eagle appears similar to Batman's old pal Green Arrow. The two have somewhat identical character designs, and just like Green Arrow, Eagle also intends to help his friends and the people around him. But the comic book version is very different, and does appear to have a character design that seems very much like it's mocking Hawkman. Sadly, we didn't see him in action. Otherwise, it would have been interesting to see this character next to the wild and crazy characters we've gotten used to. Doppelganger, Mystique. The Doppelganger's powers are very much in his name. He can instantly become anyone's doppelganger, allowing us to witness this character go on a weirdly exciting journey. This obese man works for Madeline Stillwell and poses as a woman named Rhonda to seduce the senator and sleep with him, so that he can take his photo and blackmail him. While it might seem like an exciting mission for the character, his next mission in Season 2 was when he had an agreement with Homelander and became Madeline to satisfy him sexually. But when Homelander realizes his desperation for love, he kills Doppelganger. Shape-shifting characters have been a part of Marvel at various times. There are two shape-shifting characters in the X-Men. While the Morph might just be our favorite character based on his appearance in the X-Men 97 animated series, Doppelganger's first mission brings him closer to Mystique. Doppelganger is a complete parody of Mystique in terms of how useless he becomes, and gets used by a more powerful Supe. Crimson Countess, Scarlet Witch. Crimson Countess hardly proves herself a compelling character in the series, as she appears to be obsolete in the present. While other characters appear with their powers and potential membership for the Seven, Countess has some different stuff lined up for her entirely. She's critical of the Seven and Vaught's decision to replace the Payback team with this one, and it becomes apparent when she kills someone dressed in Homelander's costume at a theme park. Later, the Countess appears on the news as campaigning to save chimpanzees, and even wrote a song for that purpose. Later, the boys catch her while she's on her night job, which is as a cam girl on Supes. And finally, Soldier Boy appears on the scene and kills her. Since we've already talked about how the Seven feels similar to the Justice League, fans might have noticed that Payback is identical to the Avengers. With Soldier Boy as their Captain America, Crimson Countess appears to be a rendition of Scarlet Witch based on her powers. We've seen how Scarlet Witch uses her hands in a particular manner to use her spells. Similarly, the Crimson Countess power only works when she can use her hands. This detail might mean that Season 3 almost gave us a Justice League versus the Avengers moment. However, considering the vast variety of projects Marvel and DC have under development, it won't be surprising to see such a project come to fruition. Meanwhile, we can watch the boys to witness the possibilities.
It's from me.
Mesmer, Charles Xavier. Vought used a variety of supes for different purposes, and one such supe was used for the sake of stardom, which gave Vought some development in the media. Mesmer became a celebrity in childhood when he appeared on the Mesmerizer television series from the 90s, where he portrayed a psychic. But when Mesmer got old, his popularity died, and he became one of those who signed the posters and DVDs in the convention booths for fans. The boys approached him for help in return for visitation hours with his child, whose custody he had lost. He would help find out about Kimiko's past, and this was the very first time we found out about the the supervillain project from Vought. Later, he would turn against the boys and trade his information with Homelander, which would ultimately lead to his demise at the hands of Butcher. Based on this very tiny appearance of the character, we understand that he has no ability to fight against his enemies except for telepathy. He's a parody of Charles Xavier, and unlike Xavier, he can actually walk around and still doesn't learn any other skills. There are quite a few candidates in the Marvel Universe who can touch someone and use their telepathic skills on them. However, imagining how useless Mesmer proves to be compared to Xavier is still hilarious. But then, the boys didn't go entirely after the X-Men parodies, because that will be something to look out for.
Change back! Change!
Marvelous verdict. Now, the boys have been inspired by the vast world of comics and movies, and it's interesting that the series took this trend forward and referenced actual world events and characters. You never know what might appear next, and its relevance to the present situation. The fact that we got to see some of the worst conditions a superhero might go to opens up the world of superheroes a lot more. Now we know what would happen if superheroes existed. Gladly, we have a group of people who would look out for us too. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.